So hi everyone, I'm your host for today. I'm Victoria. I go by she, her pronouns. I am currently in my fourth year studying cognitive systems. I am the marketing director over at nwPlus, which is the organization that hosts cmd-f. Currently, I am a project lead and UX UI VR designer at UBC Emerging Media Lab. I am also a coffee chat, matcha, memoir, music enthusiast. And these slides will be released, I think, just right about now or in a few seconds. So you can also follow along and click on the link so you can connect with me there. I just have my LinkedIn linked. Okay, and to my left, I have the amazing TAs, Irene and Taryn. I'll just get them to, oh yeah, awesome. They know the drill. Yeah, so Irene, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is business students, and going to Canada things.
Hi, I'm Taryn. I'm a teacher. Political, roles, international roles right now.
Yeah, and then so we'll have a short period at the end where you can come up and just network with us, ask questions, just talk to us. Really, it's not really like a fancy term of networking. And I also have their LinkedIn's linked there if you want to connect with them. But essentially for today, our agenda is pretty simple. We're just going to start off with an introduction for why you should network and what is networking essentially. And then we're going into a quick segment about just outreach, so how you conduct outreach over LinkedIn and in person. And then once you finally have a coffee chat booked or a call booked with someone, what you do in that to really maximize the value out of that. And then afterwards, how you cultivate long-term mentorships and relationships with the people that you meet. And then finally, yeah, Q&A at the end and a little bit of just a meet and greet networking session. So why network? I like to think of it as an opportunity to foster meaningful relationships with others in the industry that I'm interested in going into, but also related industries, in order to really learn from the lived experiences of other people and then just form lasting connections. So sort of just making new friends, making new lasting connections. Yeah, so that's my personal definition of networking. I'm sure it means something different to everyone. But some side effects of networking may include more knowledge, because you do get a lot of more resources and information when you talk to people and you expand your network. You also get more friends who you can network with, more connections of people that you know, more familiar faces in the industry, more opportunities because essentially you're expanding your circle and expanding your network. So sometimes there's definitely opportunities that come up from the people that in your network, and then of course more fun. Yeah. Okay, so essentially, it can be kind of broken down into a three-stage process. This is sort of the higher level view of it. So you would first start with stage one, which is outreach. So essentially, in online communities is a good way to meet people. So for example, there are platforms and I'll go more into this later, but there are platforms like ADP List and Boba Talks, which sole intention is for you to be able to schedule a coffee chat or one-on-one meeting with someone virtually who is an expert in their field or someone who's a working professional in their field. So I've met some pretty cool mentors through those platforms because I'm interested in the product management as well. I've met some pretty cool PM, UX, UI designers, individuals out of various variety of companies. And then another way to also just meet people is going to be in person. So at cmd-f, you'll have sponsor booths and speed networking sessions. So that would be really interesting and a great way for you to get that initial interaction with someone. There's also career fairs. UBC does them all the time. You might have heard about the Computer Science Society. They do a career fair as well. So once you've just sort of expanded your horizon and started looking at where you can find more people, it would be to set up that one-on-one individual meeting with them. And then in that meeting, you want to be careful to ask them strategic questions and go over topics that you think would really benefit you and are relevant to your goals. And then finally, definitely really important is to follow up and build that relationship. So I'll be sharing some tips for that as well. Okay, so we can start off with outreach. So who here has a LinkedIn profile? Okay, great. I think that's everyone. Okay, so yeah, so I'm glad that you already have one. So essentially, I'm going to share like a strategy for how I look for people at companies that I want to work at. So for example, so some examples of people that you can look out for would be like common connections. So these are, so on LinkedIn, they have like your first degree connections, which are the people you're directly connected to, but then they also have your second degree connections, which essentially are people that your first degree connections are connected to. And yeah, so amongst those common connections, I would sometimes look for a similar school, a similar organization, like nwPlus, or a similar event like cmd-f. And then you would also look for someone maybe with your desired role or desired company. So for example, we have on a screenshot here, you can see, I just typed in like software engineer Google, and we have like a bunch of individuals that popped up. You can also filter your search by clicking on all filters and setting advanced filters. So you can filter by country, what they talk about if they post a lot on LinkedIn, and then also their current company. So this is a really great way for you to sort of get a sense of who in your immediate network you're able to reach out to more effectively right away. Another really great tip that I like is going directly to the company pages themselves. So I have nwPlus here, even though we're not a company. We're an organization, but essentially, yeah, so say I want to work at like Lululemon or something. So they have a page like this as well. And then when I click onto their page and I click on the people tab, I can see a list of how many associated like members and employees they might have, where they live, where they study. So just great statistics on that. And then I can also, if I scroll down, I can also see people that I might know. So my like first or second degree connections that work at the company. And this is a great way to like see who exactly is working there. You can also search by title. So you sometimes, if, for example, I really want to do like product management, so I can search like product manager into that search bar at the top or middle of the screen actually. And yeah, and you can really easily find people that way. So that's a little tip I like to use. And then, so finally, once you've found something that you think looks really cool and interesting, you want to perhaps maybe schedule a call with them to learn more about their role. So these are some of the things that I like to do, a little process that I like to follow for how to do exactly that. Yeah, so the first thing, just be polite and friendly. You're talking to another human being. The second thing is be actionable with your ask. So say I'm wanting to schedule like a call with them, and I want it to be like an online call, and maybe around like 15 to 20 minutes is usually a good ask, so that it doesn't sound like super long, not like an hour. And yeah, just say something like, oh, hi, and I'll have examples of how you would do this later, but I guess just as an example right now, you would say something like, hi, blank, I heard about you through cmd-f, and I would like to schedule a 15 to 20 minute call with them next week to get to know cmd-f a little bit better. And yeah, and then, so what I did there was also highlighting something from their profile that I think is cool. So like cmd-f, like maybe they are someone who organized cmd-f. You can also highlight like a shared experience or a common interest. So for example, maybe you know them through like volleyball intramurals. I don't know why I thought of that. But yeah, however you really like got to know them, you can also highlight that. And then just say thanks and then rinse and repeat. But just two things to note with that is that with personalized invite, you do have a 300 character limit. And there's also a limit on how many invites you can send per day and the personalized invites per month. And I would just, I think, search the limits up because I think it's different from everyone. My invite limit has been stuck at like 4 invites for like a while now, and I'm like slightly concerned, but it's okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh, let's go back. Yeah. So here I have just 2 examples. And the one on the left is what I would call like a cold example. And the one on the right is what I would call like a warm message or a warm example. So essentially, For the one on the left, it's someone that I've never met before. It's someone, for example, who works at my target company and went to the same school, University of British Columbia, as me. So I would write something like that. And then on the right is someone that I've met at like an event, like cmd-f or some other event, and I want to just follow up and build that connection even greater with a call. So those are 2 examples. And yeah, so there's definitely a bunch of other platforms. I've mentioned some of these before, but yeah, other online platforms where you can meet mentors and schedule calls through that. So the first is ADP List, and essentially I think it's the largest free like mentorship community. I believe I have a link to this at the very end, so but you can also just search it up. But essentially, a bunch of different professionals are on there, and whoever is willing to schedule like a 30-minute call, they'll have like a calendar function within the platform. And then you can just send like a personalized message. You can also send sometimes like what you want to discuss with them. And a lot of the mentors will request that you do send something like that. So for example, if I want like a resume review straight off the bat, I can request that in my message. And then they also do their calls like, within their platform. So not typically, so unlike other platforms where you might just meet someone and you have to schedule a call separately, you would have to schedule a call like right away. Yeah. And also Boba Talks is also a really good one. It's targeted for students in university mostly actually. So industry professionals, same concept. You book a slot on their Calendly. You kind of just give a brief overview about what you want to talk about during the call, maybe like a link to your LinkedIn profile or some other social media so they can get to know you a little bit better. And then you just like submit, and then you meet them through Boba Talks. And then there's also Discord and Slack communities. So I've had more of a design background, so that's why these ones are slightly more like design tailored. So for example, Design Buddies and Vancouver Design Check-in. Those are 2 like design communities where you can meet people at, and then also rewriting the code. So this one is, I think, a North America based, again, like platform where you get to meet different professionals who are of underrepresented genders. And this does skew a little bit into more like software engineering type professionals, but definitely something that you can look at if that's something you're interested in. And once you're in those communities, I would look for networking and intros channels, because those channels are usually filled with people who are willing to chat and like wanting to chat. And yeah, and of course, hackathon Discords, we'll have a channel on our Discord called intros usually, and you can definitely post like an intro message there and get to know people that way. So what if you're meeting someone in person? So for example, you're meeting a sponsor at cmd-f. I know we have a ton of great sponsors lined up. I think one is Red Brick. So you can say like, I'm talking to the Red Brick rep, like how would I conduct that conversation? So first, introduce yourself and your background. This is really important because not only does it like break the ice a little bit, but it also gives like them a little bit more of an idea about you. So then that they can point you to opportunities that might be more tailored for you. So for example, if they're hiring for a software co-op and you're really interested in that, they can definitely like immediately think of you right away. So similar to that, like include a lead in or questions. So say something like a specific, like I'd love to learn more about what Red Brick does if you have no clue what it does, or you might also ask like what role they're in, how the culture of the company is like, the pros and cons of working there, who they work with. And then most importantly, get their contact information to stay in touch. Usually you can just sort of just ask like, oh, do you have LinkedIn? Can we connect on LinkedIn? And they're usually pretty open to that. And definitely make sure to follow up after the event with my warm message a couple of slides back. Okay, so now that you have a coffee chat scheduled or one-on-one online meeting scheduled, what do you do? So the first thing is to send a calendar invite. So I would try to send like a Google Calendar invite if possible, because then they have like the Google Meet function automatically like enabled if you want to set like a video meeting. So then you have like, the meeting link right away, but you can also just like create a Zoom meeting link and then put that in the invite. If they don't have a Google Calendar, or if you just prefer Zoom. And then the next thing that you're going to do to prepare for this call is to do a lot of research, or a little bit of stalking. So yeah, so essentially you would go through their LinkedIn with like a goal in mind. So what do you want to get out of this call essentially? Is it learning more about the field of UX UI design, if that's something that you're really new to and they're like an expert in? So you would tailor those questions that you want to ask specific to that. So I usually like to aim for at least like 5 to 6 questions or topics for a 30-minute call. Like if you don't have specific questions, you definitely don't have to like come up with them on the spot. And you can also definitely come up with questions on the spot and like ask follow-up questions as well. But you can also come in with like general topics. So for example, I just want to know like more about like their team dynamics, for example, and what they do within their team setting, like how many people are on their team, like the distribution of roles, etc. But yeah, the moral of the story is that it's just better to be over-prepared rather than under-prepared. But of course, yeah, definitely like judge the flow of the conversation and feel free to just relax and ask follow-up questions, ask casual questions if you have to. Remember that it's just a conversation with another human, so it should be pretty good. But yeah, now that you're in the call or you're prepping for the call and you're just like, if you're stuck on what questions to ask, these are some of the topics I like to go through and kind of just formulate questions based on that. So for example, I like to ask about their roles. So like what team are they on? What project do they work on? A lot of times at bigger companies, they have specific like tools and projects that they work on. So I like hearing a little bit about that. How large or cross-functional their team. So this is more like about team distribution and like if they're a developer, like how many designers do they have in their teams, like their PM, etc. And also what does like a day in the life look like for you? Same thing, like culture, similar thing actually. So like pros and cons about working at this place, what their favorite thing is, like what drew them to this place in particular, or questions that I like to ask. Advice. So for example, if I'm prepping or if I see an open role at the company and I really want to apply for that role, I'll ask a little bit more detailed questions, scoot towards that. So about the interview process, maybe about like their resume, their cover letter, their application in general. And then also like along those lines, like what would they recommend someone in my position to do to stand out? This is something that I like to ask. And then sometimes, depending on the person, like maybe a little bit about their background, if they have a super cool college major or like a similar college major as me, as myself. Yeah, and then also, I also like to ask like value-driven questions. So if I notice from their profile that they do a lot of mentoring or if they're really involved with the community, I'll ask a little bit about that. And then probably like one of the most like topics that I would emphasize asking about is knowledge, actually. So I think like one of the points that I mentioned at the start was that networking is a really great opportunity to learn from people, because you do get a lot of knowledge and things that you wouldn't know before just by having conversations. So I would ask like how they build those key skills that they use daily. If they have any resources that they like to recommend, like podcasts or books, or videos. And this is actually a really great way to stay in touch because then you can always be like, oh, I read this book that you recommended and I really liked it. Yeah, so I think that's definitely a great idea to kind of include in your question asking. And then also, yeah, just to like wrap it up, if you have like just questions for like fun or hobbies, I think that definitely helps keep it casual too. So an example of tailoring, we can go through this if you want. So we also don't have to. Essentially, I know the text might be a bit small, so we can kind of skip this, but essentially I have just like my LinkedIn profile and like how I would tailor it. Does anyone have any questions like right off the bat? If not, I can kind of just walk, because I'm like a little closer to my screen and I know myself and my background. I can kind of just walk us through how we would tailor questions based off this. Okay, I can kind of just do that. Okay, so essentially, I would focus on like their about section on their LinkedIn because I think a lot of the times like people essentially give like a great overview of what they do and what's interests them based on that. And then the next section I would focus on is experiences. I've like screenshotted a snippet about that, but essentially look at the experiences that they have, if there's anything that really interests you, anything like that. And then I would also look at like their volunteer experience. So volunteer organizations that they're part of. And then finally, like skills, if there's like a cool skill or like certifications, I also like asking people sometimes like whether they think their certification is like worth it or like needed for their specific role. And yeah, I think that's definitely something that helps when you're just like scanning someone's profile and you don't really know what to ask, but just focusing on those sections in particular. Yes. That's a great example of a question that is tailored. Thanks, Irene. Yeah, so I'll just answer it, I guess, right away. But essentially, I started off at nwPlus in 2020 in my first year. And I was on the design team for a semester and then cmd-f logistics. So I'm actually organized a hackathon that you will be attending. And then I moved into cmd-f logistics, and then co-president last year and then marketing director. And I think I really learned something new every single year. Obviously, my first year, everything was really brand new to me. So I think I learned a lot about just like event logistics and like public speaking. Because although the hackathons that we were running at that time were like online, I did have to speak a little bit to our large audience online. And then for co-president, I think that's definitely a really great role. I think you definitely learn a lot about just like managing different teams and like a lot about communication cross-functionally. Our teams are really big in nwPlus. So we have like a bunch of different teams like marketing, logistics, dev, design, and just sort of making sure that everyone's on the same page. There's also some like external communication that comes to that role. And then finally, marketing director, obviously just marketing is a huge skill that I've learned. But I think this is actually my first director experience. So I work with like a smaller, closely knit team of like 5 to 6. And I think that working with them has honestly been my most rewarding part of my journey. And I've learned a lot about just managing a team for that. So yeah. Oh, yes.
When if I take your CV, would it be like the same and synchronized, have more information or something?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, so it would, I'm still like debating on whether it's a good idea to put a lot of information on LinkedIn. But I would definitely have less information on my resume because it's like a 1-page document and I have to kind of pick and choose the bullet points that I put on there and tailor it to whatever role I'm applying for. So on LinkedIn, it would be like a broader overview. But I do also like if I'm nitpicking on myself, would say that I have too much information on there. So I definitely will scale it down a little bit. I think your LinkedIn should have definitely a little bit about each role that you have, but maybe not too much. And like, yeah. Does that answer it? Okay. Well, okay. Yeah, so now that you have your coffee chat or online meeting scheduled, what do you do? So essentially, the first thing I would always stress is that you would be early, try to join the meeting before they do, just so it gives you a little bit of a chance to like settle down. And while you're in the meeting, definitely keep an eye on time throughout. So some people have like hard cutoffs at whatever time the meeting goes until. So I would definitely be cognizant of that. And then I would just start off with introductions, even if you've already introduced yourself through previous like messaging, just to keep it fresh and like just to, yeah, make the transition into a meeting like a little bit easier. And when you introduce yourself, this is kind of similar to what I mentioned before in the external like reach out, but also just talk about your goals. It helps them to keep you in mind for future opportunities and openings. And yeah, ask questions. Don't be afraid of follow-ups. Definitely just keep an active listening. Yes, I would try to take notes if you can during a meeting. I really like just taking notes because I feel like it helps and keeps me focused. But I do think that too much note taking is a little bit not advised because then it kind of distracts you from what they're actually saying. So try to find a balance with that. Try to use like bullet points. And so essentially how I would structure like a note-taking document is that I would have the prepared questions that I have, and then I would just take notes underneath each question that I asked. Yeah, and then finally, as I alluded to before, definitely ask for resources that they would recommend, because this is an easy way to stay in touch and for you to learn more about their respective field. Um, and then also really important is to ask if they know anyone else that would be willing to chat. This also doesn't just apply for like at the end of like conversations like this, but if you are meeting someone organically through like a career fair or like a sponsor booth, and for example, maybe they are like a software developer, but I'm not interested in software development. I also have asked in the past if they have colleagues who would be willing to speak to me, and that has actually worked out really well. So yeah, I think people are just generally willing to like kind of facilitate connections if asked. And then if it's this one is more depending on context, but if it's more of like a casual meeting, it's not really quite like a structured one. You can also ask if they have questions for you or like anything that they want to discuss. And then end it off with like a thank you, just to be polite. Um, Okay, and then how would you cultivate your long-term connections? Um, so yeah, definitely after the call, if it's relevant, just follow up and thank them and schedule the next call. So if they mentioned during the call that they would be willing to do like a mock interview with you or like a resume or portfolio review, be sure to schedule that. And again, like just keep the same outline as before. You can also dive deeper into the resources that they recommend and follow up with that as well. And then if you see their posts on like LinkedIn or something, and you think it's what they're doing is really cool, don't be afraid to like and comment and engage with that. Um, and definitely what I like to do also is check in a couple times a year. So during like, the holidays, or just any time really, I like to send like a message of gratitude, just to like if to the mentors that I think played a, like a deeper or more important role in my life this past year. So yeah, I just like to check in, and this is really great for like how you would cultivate long-term relationships. Okay, and then yes, I have another tip in order to help you cultivate long-term connections. So I like to keep track of my coffee chats using either like a Notion page or a Google Doc. I got really lazy recently, so I just have everyone's like on one Google Doc. But I'll be walking you through a little bit of how I would structure it with the Notion page. So essentially on that Notion page, you would note details like the date of your meeting, their company, their role, and then a last update or like what you talked about in your last meeting. And yeah, I have that meme there because I feel like that does make me sound a little bit like a stalker. But essentially, this is a Notion template I found online that I think really gets the idea across about what you want to be achieving with this. So essentially, it's sort of like a contact list, and then you have their name, their like company or role, what you talked about last time, and then like you can also add like a status if you want, and then the date that you last connected on. And essentially, in that Notion page, ideally, you would be able to also put your meeting notes in that, so it helps you keep track. Yeah, it's a super organized way to do that. And ideally, you would have just like a whole list of that. But as mentioned, I just keep everyone's like notes in one doc. Yeah, but I have the template linked in the slides if you want that. But yeah, so I know we're over a little bit of time, so that was all for today. I hope that this workshop gave you the confidence to schedule your next coffee chat. I just have some resources linked at the end. The first article is by Ben, who is an NW alumni. He will also be a mentor at cmd-f. And it's essentially like a very, very, very detailed version of this workshop, but with like additional like templates and email strategies and things like that. So I definitely recommend you check that out. And then before you go, if you could scan this QR code and give me some feedback, also connect with us on social media, that would be great. But I guess we have like maybe like 2 or 3 minutes to do some networking if you like, or Q&A with myself and the TAs. So if you want, you can come up to the front and then we can do that. So yeah, this is a little refresher on who we are. But yeah, the feedback form at the end, I'll have that up later. Yeah, thank you for coming.